lethal injection, created as the pinnacle of humanism, fails more often than any other execution method in modern history. Official statistics show that 7.1% of these executions are botched. This is a higher failure rate than medieval hanging at 3.1%, or even the electric chair at 1.9%. The sterile image of a medical procedure with white coats and precise dosages collides with the brutal reality of convulsions, paralysis while fully conscious, and agony that lasts for dozens of minutes. How did a technology designed to eliminate pain become its primary source? The answer to this question reveals a shocking truth about the entire system, and it lies not in the chemistry itself, but in what pharmaceutical giants and prison authorities are hiding. Behind the facade of justice lie three unsolvable paradoxes. First, why is the most technologically advanced method, developed in laboratories and approved by committees, less reliable than the primitive firing squad, a technology that hasn't changed in 100 years? We will find the answer when we dissect the mechanism of the perfect murder. The second paradox: what caused a global shortage of execution drugs in a world where the pharmaceutical industry can synthesize any substance by the ton? This is the result of corporate wars and secret protocols, which we will discuss later. And third, why, in the 21st century, are states not only returning to old methods, but also inventing new ones that the UN directly equates to cruel human experiments? The answer awaits. These three questions are the keys to understanding the entire system. This investigation will go beyond the debate of pro versus con. Instead, we will perform an autopsy on the procedure itself to completely shatter the illusion of a clean medical operation. We will show you its hidden mechanics, systemic incompetence, secret cocktails of untested drugs, and bureaucratic protocols that lead to guaranteed disaster. You will see not only how people are executed, but why the system inevitably produces torture. You will receive an arsenal of facts from official reports, autopsy records, and court cases that are usually classified as for official use only. For example, more than 20 global pharmaceutical giants, including Pfizer, have officially banned the sale of their drugs for use in executions, creating a legal and logistical collapse. We will show you what is meant to be hidden, the contrast between the dry official protocol and the real agony documented by eyewitnesses. Our investigation has a clear structure with three key turning points. In 4 minutes, we will break down the official lethal injection protocol step by step. You will understand why the humane cocktail, perfect on paper, has in practice become the main cause of unbearable suffering. In 9 minutes, you will see the direct legacy of the Third Reich in a modern American prison and learn how the technology of Nazi gas chambers evolved into a new scientific method of execution that was used just recently. And in 19 minutes, we will get to the most important part, an examination of the most shocking botched executions. We will analyze them literally, second by second, to prove that systemic errors are not accidental, but a programmed result. And so, our investigation begins. Prepare to see the myth of the humane injection crumble. How did a method, conceived by a medical examiner as a painless shot, become the most unreliable in the state's arsenal? The ideal 3-drug protocol worked like shutting down a complex machine. First, consciousness was switched off with an anesthetic, sodium thiopental. Then, breathing was stopped with a paralytic, pancuronium bromide. And finally, the main power source, the heart, was shut down with potassium chloride. But in 2011, the European Union imposed a complete ban on the export of these drugs for executions. More than 20 global pharmaceutical giants, including Pfizer, joined the boycott. This brought the entire system crashing down. Prisons were forced to find drugs on the black market, using substances with expired shelf lives. But the most terrifying part began when they started creating their own secret recipes. If the standard drugs are no longer available, what exactly are they using to kill people today? Authorities found a seeming solution: midazolam, a sedative that was positioned as an almost equally effective alternative. The illusion shattered on April 29, 2014. During the execution of Clayton Lockett, the midazolam failed to work. Strapped to a gurney, he suddenly lifted his head and said, "Oh man." His body began to convulse so violently that the gurney shook. The execution turned into a 43-minute agony that had to be halted. Anesthesiologists later testified in court. Midazolam is fundamentally incapable of providing the necessary level of anesthesia, turning the paralytic into an instrument of torture. But the problem isn't just the chemicals, it's the hands of the person inserting the needle. Why is a procedure that mimics a medical one performed without a single qualified medical professional? Doctors refuse to participate because of the Hippocratic Oath. Therefore, the execution team consists of ordinary prison employees who have undergone a brief training. The result is predictable. In dozens of cases, they spent an hour unable to find a vein, making painful punctures, and even cutting into tissue. The drugs seeped under the skin, causing chemical burns. Autopsy reports reveal an even more horrific picture: froth in the lungs of the executed. This is a sign of edema, meaning the person was slowly suffocating while conscious but unable to show it due to the paralytic. This series of failures has led many to wonder, perhaps the good old electric chair was more reliable. At first glance, its logic is simple. A powerful jolt of electricity instantly stops the heart and brain. Here, unlike with complex chemistry, it seems impossible to make a mistake. But this is an illusion. The history of the electric chair is filled with horrifying failures: inmates surviving the first jolt, heads catching fire due to faulty electrodes, and the smell of burning flesh described by reporters. The facade of lethal injections humanity has crumbled, exposing a system of experimentation and incompetence. But the alternative is not a step back to reliability, but a step into another room of horrors. And to understand where it came from, we need to go back to the time of the Great War of the Currents between Nikola Tesla and Thomas Edison. This technology was born not as an instrument of justice, but as a weapon in a corporate war. To discredit the alternating current of his competitor, Nikola Tesla, Thomas Edison publicly executed animals and then lobbied for the creation of a chair that ran on this supposedly more dangerous technology. Its debut on August 6, 1890, was a catastrophe. The first jolt of 1,000 volts did not kill William Kemmler. Witnesses heard a groan. The second jolt literally cooked his body, filling the room with the smell of burnt flesh. George Westinghouse commented, "They would have done better with an axe." But despite the monstrous failure, the method was adopted. Behind its simple design, the devil is in the details. What happens to a body when 2,000 volts are passed through it? In theory, everything is calculated: shaved contact points, sponges soaked in saline solution. But the system is extremely unstable. The body's resistance, the sponge's moisture, the tightness of the electrodes, the slightest error turns the execution into torture. A dried-out sponge changes from a conductor to a resistor and burns. A voltage of 2,000 volts raises the temperature of internal organs to 60 degrees Celsius, 140 degrees Fahrenheit. Blood proteins coagulate like boiling an egg. Eyeballs pop out of their sockets. The skin is charred. This is not a hypothesis, but a documented reality from execution reports. Why do smoke and flames sometimes erupt from under the leather hood? This is a direct consequence of a dried-out sponge igniting the hair and skin. On March 25, 1997, during the execution of Pedro Medina in Florida, this ceased to be a technical footnote. A blue-orange flame, a foot high, shot out from under the hood. Acrid smoke filled the room, causing witnesses to cough uncontrollably. After such incidents, the Supreme Courts of Georgia and Nebraska declared the electric chair to be cruel punishment. The system was once again forced to search for a cleaner alternative and found it in a technology with an even darker legacy. What method could be presented as progress after burning people alive? The answer is the gas chamber. Its theoretical advantages: it's airtight, flameless, and offers a controlled environment. This is the illusion of a step toward predictability. But the gas used for decades in the U.S., hydrogen cyanide, is a derivative of the same substance, Zyklon B, used in Nazi death camps. The technology from the War of the Currents became an instrument of torture. Now we will delve into the history of a method whose modern revival once again raises questions about human experimentation. In the next chapter, we will trace the path of the gas chamber to its latest innovation, nitrogen execution, first used in 2024. How did a technology born in the trenches of World War I and perfected in Nazi death camps become an instrument of justice in American prisons? In the 1920s, the state of Nevada was looking for a humane replacement for botched hangings. The idea of using hydrogen cyanide seemed progressive, a quick death from inhaling vapor. The reality was different. Inmates instinctively held their breath. Death came after 10, and sometimes 18, minutes of excruciating convulsions, similar to an epileptic seizure. This graphic cruelty and the strong association with the Holocaust led to the method's abandonment. But the idea of execution by gas did not die. It mutated. Is it possible to die from suffocation without feeling it? This is the very promise that makes the new method, nitrogen hypoxia, so attractive to authorities. The theory is flawless. Replacing oxygen in the inhaled air with pure nitrogen leads to a rapid loss of consciousness. Unlike with asphyxiation, carbon dioxide, which causes panic, does not build up in the blood. The body continues to breathe, but the brain and organs stop receiving oxygen, like a plant in complete darkness. In practice, it is an untested experiment. A sealed industrial mask is placed on the inmate's face. The process, until death is pronounced, can take more than 20 minutes. The UN Human Rights Office called for the first such execution in January 24 to be halted, calling it potential torture. Where do prisons get pure nitrogen for this process? The answer reveals the real reason for its selection. Nitrogen, which makes up 78% of the air we breathe, is one of the cheapest industrial gases. It's used for welding and food packaging. Its sale cannot be banned, unlike pharmaceutical drugs. It is an elegant solution to the logistical collapse created by the boycott. But this simplicity has a downside. There are no medical standards for nitrogen execution. Each state develops its own secret protocols, which dramatically increases the risk of leaks, equipment failure, and incompetence. Once again, secrecy becomes the key problem. We have seen 3 technological dead ends: chemical, electrical, and biological. The injection failed because of chemistry, the chair because of physics, the gas because of biology. Their common feature is the attempt to hide the act of killing behind a facade of science, to make it acceptable to society. But this search for a clean method is self-deception. The problem is not the technology, but the unpredictability of the human body. While lawyers argue about the purity of gases and the composition of cocktails, the state's arsenal retains a method devoid of any scientific pretense. A method that does not hide its nature, the firing squad. And paradoxically, it is now being called the most humane. Why? In an age of drones and smart weapons, are states like South Carolina and Utah reintroducing firing squads, a method from the last century, into their laws? It's a pragmatic plan B in case lethal injection drugs are unavailable. Rifles and marksmen can always be found. But the real shock is something else. Some lawyers and judges are calling the firing squad the most humane method. Death from multiple wounds to the heart and major blood vessels is nearly instantaneous. 0%. That is the official failure rate for executions by firing squad in the U.S. The bloodiest method is laying claim to the title of most humane because it does not hide its nature. Behind this simplicity lies a ritual in which one detail is designed not for the inmate, but for the executioners themselves. How do you guarantee that 5 marksmen will simultaneously hit a small target from several meters away? The protocol is ritualized. The inmate is strapped to a chair, a hood is placed over their head, and a white target is pinned to their chest. Facing them are 5 volunteers with rifles, but one of the rifles is loaded with a blank round. None of the shooters knows who has it. Thus, the responsibility for the fatal shot is dissolved into a collective action. Each can believe that perhaps they were not the one who delivered the final blow. But even this system is not immune to failure. Under stress, the marksman can miss the heart, condemning the person to a slow death from blood loss. If you were a legislator, what would you choose? A clean procedure with the risk of hidden agony? Or a bloody but quick firing squad? This dilemma forces us to choose between 2 horrors: a procedure that looks clean but may be torture, and a bloody spectacle that may be more merciful. Lethal injection was created for the comfort of witnesses and society. It mimics medicine, is free of blood and visible violence, and allows the system to maintain a facade of civility. But behind this facade lies the agony of Clayton Lockett and chemical burns. This aesthetic is a lie. The firing squad, however, doesn't pretend to be medicine. It doesn't hide its purpose. What is worse, cruelty that lies about its nature, or cruelty that tells the truth? This is not a theoretical choice. Right now, at least 27,687 people on death rows around the world are waiting for it. We have examined high technology and simple ballistics, but it seems we have reached the limits. Or have we? All modern methods suffer from one problem: the conflict between the desire for a perfect execution and the unpredictable reality of the human body. But in the laws of some countries and U.S. states, 2 ghosts from the past still exist: hanging and beheading. These are not just historical artifacts in old books. They are active options that could be used today. We are moving away from the debate over technology and delving into a world where science is applied to the rope and the blade. In the next chapter, we will learn about scientific hanging and why the slightest miscalculation turns it into either slow strangulation or accidental decapitation. In the 19th century, an attempt was made to turn hanging into an exact science. It was a response to botched executions where death came too slowly. Thus, the long drop method was born, a precise calculation of the rope's length based on the inmate's weight to create a force of exactly 5,600 newtons. This is enough to rupture the second cervical vertebra, but not to tear off the head. Official calculation tables created an illusion of complete control, as if a formula for instant death had been found. But this system worked like an old apothecary's scale. The slightest error turned calculation into catastrophe. If the rope is too short, the person dies of strangulation over 20 minutes. Too long, and the head is completely severed from the body. This fragile illusion of control collapsed, but the method itself did not disappear. In the 21st century, a state can legally kill a person with a rope. In Iran, Iraq, and Japan, hanging remains the primary method. In Saudi Arabia, it's beheading. But the shock is this: Until 2019, hanging was a legal backup method in the state of New Hampshire if lethal injection became unavailable. The legal language of the law stated, "The punishment of death shall be inflicted by hanging by the neck." The last such execution in the U.S. took place in 1996, later than the release of the world's first DVD. This isn't history. It's a cycle where the failure of new technologies forces the system to keep the most ancient and brutal alternatives in reserve. But the survival of these methods is not just a legal curiosity. It reflects a difference in philosophy. While some states hide executions behind prison walls, others turn them into a public performance, an act of intimidation. But modern technology is encroaching on this archaic ritual. Public hangings in Iran are filmed on cell phones, turning a state act into a viral spectacle. A construction crane, used for maximum visibility, becomes a symbol of the fusion of modern machinery and medieval practice. The ritual does not humanize, it normalizes cruelty. We have examined the entire arsenal: the injection that mimics medicine, the electric chair, a child of the Industrial Revolution, the gas chamber, a legacy of the 20th century, and finally, the rope, a ghost of the Middle Ages. Despite their vast differences, they all pursue one goal: to systematize killing. And they are all united by one element: a formal protocol. A true understanding of the system lies not in studying the tools, but in analyzing the instructions for them. It is this attempt to regulate everything and hide it under a veil of secrecy that is the main cause of disasters. In the next chapter, we will dissect these documents and see what a step-by-step guide to state-sanctioned killing looks like. What makes an ordinary manual? A 15-page document, one of the most closely guarded secrets in the justice system. On one hand, it's just an administrative regulation. On the other, it's the key to understanding why executions fail. Its public-facing part creates an illusion of absolute control. A detailed schedule of the final 24 hours, the procedure for the last meal, the exact words that must be spoken. But the most important sections in these documents are either blacked out or described in extremely vague terms. This applies to the exact names of the drugs, the qualifications of the executioners, and, most importantly, the actions to be taken in the event of a failure. Secrecy is not a side effect, but a fundamental part of the system, protecting it from legal challenges. This darkness makes it impossible to contest the procedure before it begins, turning every execution into an experiment. But who are the people who agree to operate blindly under such instructions? The state prohibits doctors from participating in executions due to the Hippocratic Oath. Yet it entrusts this quasi-medical procedure to anonymous volunteers from the prison staff. The system tries to protect them psychologically through anonymity and the diffusion of responsibility. But the reality is a brutal blow. Among those who have ever participated in executions, there is a shockingly high rate of PTSD, alcoholism, and suicide. The protocol protects the state legally, but destroys the executioners. Former Virginia Chief Executioner Jerry Givens, after 62 executions, confessed that during each procedure, he would clench a small wooden cross in his pocket until it hurt, trying to separate himself from what his hands were doing. This human factor, stress and burnout, in turn becomes a cause of errors. But what happens when these people, following an incomplete protocol, encounter something that isn't in the manual? An execution protocol is like a manual for building a dam that details every step of pouring concrete but completely omits the chapter on what to do if the river floods. It contains no instructions for systemic failures. What to do if the drug doesn't work. What to do if the inmate begins to convulse. At that moment, the protocol ends, and the team is forced to improvise under immense stress in front of witnesses. On September 29, 2009, the execution of Rommel Broom was halted after 2 hours and 18 unsuccessful attempts to find a vein. He returned to death row and died of COVID-19 11 years later. This case is living proof of a complete failure in the system's planning. We have opened the system's black box, its protocols, and what we found was not a coherent regulation, but a recipe for disaster. It stands on 3 pillars of vulnerability: secrecy of the drugs, unpreparedness of the executioners, and the absence of a contingency plan. The protocol is the system's attempt to deceive itself by presenting murder as a predictable process. But the reality of human physiology always proves more complex than any manual. It is at the intersection of this rigid bureaucratic framework and unpredictable reality that the most horrific failures are born. In the next chapter, we will witness the most shocking executions in modern history and understand why the system is doomed. This is the culmination of our investigation. How does a man sentenced to a quick death die of a heart attack after 43 minutes of agony? Clayton Lockett's execution began with a problem. The team couldn't find a vein and inserted the catheter into his groin. After the first drug was administered, a doctor declared the inmate unconscious. It seemed everything was going according to plan. But a few minutes later, Lockett began to writhe and try to speak. The cause, determined later. The vein had ruptured. The lethal drugs had flowed into the surrounding tissue, causing a chemical burn. At that moment, authorities lowered a curtain, hiding the events from witnesses. From behind it, according to a lawyer, came not a scream, but a low guttural moan. Concealment is a reflex of a system that fears its own reality. Lockett's catastrophe exposed 3 systemic causes that make such failures inevitable. Why is this story not an exception, but a symptom? The first reason: a shortage of proven drugs. The boycott by the European Union has forced states to use experimental cocktails and outdated equipment. The Florida electric chair, at the time of its last use, was over 75 years old. The second reason: the human factor. People with no medical training, under extreme stress, attempt to perform a complex procedure using an incomplete manual. This is a guarantee of error. And the third fundamental reason: institutional secrecy. When a failure occurs, the first reaction is to hide it, not investigate it. These 3 vices, shortage, incompetence, and secrecy, condemn the system to an endless repetition of its mistakes. Official statistics hide the truth, but independent data paints a truly horrifying picture. How did a procedure designed to be reliable become the most flawed in history? Government reports mask reality with phrases like complications during the procedure. But independent analysis shows that over 7% of lethal injection executions in the U.S. are visibly botched. This is the highest failure rate of any legal method. 7% is 1 in every 14 people. At the end of 2023, there were at least 27,687 people on death rows worldwide. That's enough to fill Madison Square Garden. It is the population of a small city where every resident awaits a procedure with a high and known risk of a monstrous failure. We have walked through the anatomy of failure, from Lockett's case to the shocking scale of botched executions. Error in the death penalty system is not an accident. It is a feature. It is like trying to cure a disease with poison. The very nature of the medicine guarantees it will destroy the body in unpredictable ways. All the elements we have analyzed converge at a single point: the inevitability of disaster. This brings us to the final and most important question. If the system cannot even perform its basic technical task to ensure a quick and painless death, then what moral and legal right to exist does it have in the 21st century? The answer is in the final section. We have examined the entire arsenal: lethal injection, masquerading as medicine; the electric chair, promising a technological breakthrough, the gas chamber, offering scientific suffocation, even the firing squad with its military precision. Each of these methods was presented as a solution, a step toward a more reliable and civilized execution of a sentence. But behind them all lies one common goal: to create an illusion of absolute control. Control over the body, over the time of death, over the emotions of the witnesses. It is an attempt to turn a chaotic biological process into a precise engineering project. This illusion shatters in every case. The injection is defeated by the problem of veins and counterfeit drugs. The chair, by the reality of burning flesh. The gas, by excruciating agony. The newest method, nitrogen hypoxia, used in 2024 instead of the promised seconds of a quick death, resulted in the inmate being in visible convulsions for over 2 minutes, with the entire execution taking 22 minutes. We began by asking why the humane injection fails. Now we know. Because the very idea of complete control over death is a myth. This myth is sustained by the system's main tool, secrecy. Recall the blacked-out protocols, the mystery surrounding the drug's origins, the anonymity of the execution team, and the curtain that is lowered in front of witnesses during a failure. Secrecy is the DNA of the entire system. It needs it as a defense mechanism to avoid legal liability and public condemnation. If all the details were known, every execution could be challenged in court as potentially cruel. But this shield becomes its greatest vulnerability. A system based on secrecy is like a plant locked in a dark basement. Without the light of transparency, it cannot correct its defects and is doomed to rot from within. Every failure does not become a lesson, but is simply swept under the rug. This is why the drug shortage and constant failures are not temporary difficulties, but the programmed result of total opacity. Behind this impersonal machinery of protocols and technologies lies a fundamental human conflict. On one side is the condemned, whose life becomes the subject of a bureaucratic procedure. On the other is the impersonal state justice system. Our entire investigation has been dedicated to how this machine works. We have seen that it is imperfect, unreliable, and cruel. The final words of the condemned, often spoken into a microphone, become the final act of a drama. A brief personal story that contrasts sharply with the impersonal language of the protocol. Now, knowing all this, each of us is forced to rethink the boundary between justice and cruelty. The shock we felt seeing botched executions is the shock of realizing that in our world, a practice that is medieval in its essence continues to exist, merely veiled by a facade of science. We have shown you how the machine works. Now the decision is yours. We have come the full circle. From the illusion of a humane injection to the reality of a medieval noose. From sterile protocols to the chaos of botched executions. We have shown you the mechanics of the system from the inside, without embellishment or judgment. Now, it's your verdict. Is the death penalty in the 21st century, with all its flaws, risks, and secrecy, still a form of ultimate justice? Or has it become state-sanctioned murder? Your choice comes down to 2 words, justice or murder. Write just 1 word in the comments. Make your choice and see what thousands of other people think, people who, like you, now know the truth about how individuals are executed today.